Hello everyone. This is my team here today for our presentation about conflict and negotiation. Please let me introduce my team first. This is Pathum, our team leader, Sumal, Shoan, and myself, Amila. This is the agenda for our presentation, and let's step into the case study now. This presentation is regarding a case study based on a workplace incident that has two main characters called Elaine and Jerry, which you can see right here. I am about to read it out for you now for your attention. Elaine is an administrator at a boutique law firm and has been employed full time for the past 5 years. Elaine is an experienced assistant, is highly motivated, and has always received exemplary performance evaluations. 6 months ago, Elaine needed to scale back her hours, and a second administrator was hired to fill in for the days Elaine could not work. Under this arrangement, Elaine worked 3 days per week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Jerry, the new administrator, worked 3 days per week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Jerry and Elaine have the same job title, perform the same job, and are required to communicate with one another throughout the week to ensure their tasks are performed. Everything worked well for the first few months, but after a while, Elaine noticed that Jerry was putting more energy into completing the more interesting tasks and failing to complete the more mandatory and mundane tasks, leaving them for Elaine to complete instead. Elaine began writing instructions to Jerry on post-it notes asking Jerry to complete certain tasks. However, the tasks were still not being completed, leaving Elaine feeling frustrated. Elaine spoke to her direct manager George about the issue but was told it would be better if Elaine and Jerry sorted it out between them. One Wednesday, Elaine complained to Jerry that she was sick of being left to deal with the extra work that Jerry was not completing. A week later, Jerry complained to the HR director that Elaine has been rude and unhelpful to Jerry from the very first day. Now, Jerry and Elaine are angry with one another and are refusing to communicate. Before we step into the next part, we'll be looking into conflict itself in detail. Well, anyone who can explain what conflict is? Sort of a brief explanation? Any volunteers? Okay, I'll give you the explanation then. It's a process that begins when one party perceives that another party has negatively affected or is about to negatively affect something that the first party cares about. Furthermore, conflict can be damaging, and many people actively avoid dealing with situations arising from conflict. However, properly handled conflict can strengthen our dealings with other people and add to our understandings of others' views or perceptions. In a remote workplace conflict, poorly handled or addressed can have particularly negative outcomes, as the people we work with are often the same people we socialize with or live near in the community. Suma will be conducting the next part, type of conflict.
So, types of conflict. Before we try and tackle conflict and negotiation, we need to identify the types of conflict we come across. For one to understand conflict, one must identify the types of disagreement, or in general, the conflict actually is about. Is it about a disagreement about goals? Is it about people who rub off each other the wrong way? Or is it about the best way to get things done? Although each conflict is unique, researchers have classified conflict into three different categories. Number one, task conflict. A conflict over content and goals of work. Task 2, relationship conflict. Conflict based on interpersonal relationships. And third, process conflict. Conflict over how work should be done. And there's another way to understand conflict, and is to consider locus, or where the conflict occurs. Here too there are three basic types. Direct conflict, which is conflict occurs between two people. intra-group conflict, where conflict occurs within a group or a team. Intra-conflict, which is conflict between groups and teams. Now we'll look into the conflict process. Conflict process deals with 5 steps that alleviate disagreement, problems, and fighting within organizations. And there are 5 steps. The first step is potential opposition and incompatibility. The second is cognition and personalization. And third, intentions. The fourth is behavior. And fifth is outcomes. And now we shall look into the 5 processes very broadly. Potential oppositions or incompatibility, which is the first step of a conflict process. It's basically different types and conditions that arise to create opportunities for conflict. They may not lead to conflict directly, but one of these conditions may trigger conflict to surface. Cognition and personalization. At this stage, both parties sense there is a disagreement or there could be a chance of conflict, but it doesn't necessarily have an effect on the emotional involvement between the two parties. The third stage, intentions. This stage is regarding the decision making on how to take actions in a certain way. Being competitive suggests that the parties involved only cares about winning the argument and is not open to any compromise. Behavior, which is the fourth stage of this conflict process, and is about the behavioral patterns of people involved in the process conflict. This diagram, which is shown in the slides, indicates the different levels of conflict. And it provides a way of visualizing conflict behavior. All conflict exists somewhere along the right side of the column. While lower parts of the conflict are somewhat can be solved. The higher the conflict rises, the unmanageable the conflict becomes. The final stage, outcomes. At this stage of the conflict process, it means and it's the action and reaction interplay between the conflicting parties usually results in 2 outcomes. And those outcomes are functional outcomes, as in the conflict improves the group's performance. It improves the quality of decision making and brings a creative side, bring out the creativity and innovation, encouraging interest and curiosity among the group. Dysfunctional outcomes. Just as it sounds, dysfunctional outcomes is quite the opposite of functional outcomes. This result in reduction of performance and efficiency in the group, while ultimately leading to the destruction of the group. Now, to talk about negotiation, Pathum will be taking over.
Alright, first I would like to describe what negotiation is. As you can see in the slide, negotiation is a process in which 2 or more parties exchange goods or services and attempt to agree upon the exchange rate for them. In this section, we are talking about 2 general approaches. First one is distributive bargaining and the second one is integrative bargaining. Let's talk about what is distributive bargaining. This is more important because there are some arguments that cannot be solved in any other way. As an example, just imagine you are looking to buy a car. Then what you do is you go to a website which sell cars and search for a car you want, or you go to a car sale. However, you select your car and you go to buy it. Car looks well and you are happy about it, so now you want to buy it. But then you got a problem. You feel that the car is not much worth for seller's price. So you start to bargain. And this is exactly called distributive bargaining. In distributive bargaining, each side is largely focused on their own positions. The focus on position tends to draw lines on where each party stands, thus heightening the sense of an adversarial engagement. Okay, let's move to the second part, integrative bargaining. I'll give you another example. One day, a sales representative for a furniture manufacturer company just closed a $13,000 order from a small furniture ware retailer. Then the sales rep calls to his company credit department, but then the credit department told him that the company can't accept credit to this customer because of a past slow payment record. The next day, sales rep arranged a meeting with the company credit manager to discuss the problem. The sales rep do not want to lose the business, neither does the credit manager. But after considerable discussion, they agree on a solution that meets both their needs. The credit manager will approve the sale, but homeware item selling company owner will provide a bank guarantee that will ensure payment if the bill is not paid within 75 days. This is what integrative bargaining is. It means finding one or more settlements that can create win-win solution. Integrative bargaining is also known as problem solving, collaborative, and win-win negotiation. Our next session is about negotiation processes. There are 5 processes. I will briefly explain each process. First process is preparation and planning. Before the start of negotiation, one must be aware of the conflict, the history leading to the negotiation, the people involved, and their opinion of the conflict expectation from the negotiation, etc. The second one is definition of ground rules. Once the planning and strategy are developed, one has to begin defining the ground rules and procedures with other party over the negotiation itself that will do the negotiation. During this phase, the parties will also exchange their initial proposals or demands. Now, let's move to the third process. It is clarification and justification. When initial positions have been exchanged, both the parties will explain, clarify, and justify their original demands. This is the point where one party might want to provide the other with any documentation that helps support its position. The fourth one is bargaining and problem solving. The core of the negotiation process is the actual give and take in trying to fix an agreement is called a proper bargain. It is here where concession will undoubtedly need to be made by both parties. Let's move to the final one, closure and implementation. The final step in the negotiation process is validating the agreement that has been worked out and developing procedures that are necessary for implementing and monitoring. Our next topic is about individual differences in negotiation effectiveness. We all know that everyone is different in how they negotiate conflicts. So there are 4 factors affect how effectively people negotiate. They are personality, moods, culture, and gender. Let's talk about personality. Can you predict an opponent's negotiation tactics if you know something about his or her personality? Because personality and negotiation outcomes are related but only weakly. The answer is, at best, sort of. Moods or emotions? Actually, do moods and emotions influence negotiation? What do you think? Yes, exactly they do. But the way they work depends on the emotions as well as the context. Culture. Do people, different cultures, negotiate differently? Exactly, they do. For example, a Colombian is quick to negotiate more successfully with the Colombian than with the Sri Lankan. It appears that in cross-cultural negotiation, it is especially important that the negotiators be high in honesty. Emotions are culturally sensitive. Negotiators need to be especially aware of emotional dynamics in cross-cultural negotiation. For example, how United States and Chinese negotiators react to an angry counterpart. Chinese negotiators have increased their use of distributed negotiating tactics, while US negotiators decrease their use of these tactics. Now, let's move to the gender. There are many areas of organizational behavior in which men and women are not that much different. But for the negotiation, it is. A popular stereotype is that women are more cooperative and pleasant in negotiations than are men. However, this is controversial. There is some merit to it. Men tend to place a higher values on status, power, and recognition, while women tend to place a higher value on compassion and humanity. Moreover, women tend to value relationships outcomes more than do men, and men tend to value economic outcomes more than do women. Our next slide is about third party negotiations. Sometimes individuals or group representatives reach a stalemate and are unable to resolve their differences through direct negotiations. In such cases, they may return to third party to help them find a solution. As you can see, there are three basic third party negotiations. The first party is mediator. Mediators are widely used in labor management negotiations and in civil court disputes. Their overall effectiveness is fairly impressive. The settlement rate is approximately 60%, with negotiator satisfaction is at about 75%. But the situation is the key to whether mediations will succeed is the conflicting parties must be motivated to bargain and resolve their conflict. In addition, conflict strength can't be too high. Mediation is most effective under moderate level of conflict. Finally, perceptions of the mediator are important. To be effective, the mediator must be perceived as neutral and non-coercive. The second role is arbitrator. Arbitration can be voluntary or compulsory. In other words, requested by parties or forced on the parties by law or contract. The big pulse of arbitration over mediation is that is always result in a settlement. Whether or not here is a negative side depends on how heavy-handed the arbitrator appears. If one party is left feeling tremendously defeated, that party is certain to be dissatisfied and unlikely to politely accept the arbitrator's decision. Therefore, the conflict may resurface at a later time. A conciliator is the last role. Comparing conciliation with mediation in effectiveness has proven difficult because the two overlap a great deal. In practice, conciliators typically act as more than simple communication conduits. They are also engaged in fact finding, interpret messages, and persuade disputants to develop agreements. Alright, now I hope you all have an idea about conflict and negotiation. So, why don't we go for a quick quiz? Amila will present the quiz for you. Thank you.
Okay, guys, let's not make it boring. Here are the questions for you. Let's go for the first question. What are the three types of conflict and the three loci of conflict? Anybody knows the answer? Okay, seems like a no-go. Here are the answers. It's task conflict, relationship conflict, process conflict are the types of conflict. And then direct conflict, intra-group conflict, and intergroup conflict are the loci of conflict. Well, let's step into the second question. What are the steps of the process? No one? Okay. Here are the answers. Potential opposition or incompatibility, cognition and personalization, intentions, behavior, and outcomes. Here's the third question. What are the differences between distributive and integrative bargaining? It seems like a tough one. I'll give you the answer straight away. Uh, it's dividing up fixed amount of resources in win-lose situation is distributive bargaining, and finding one or more settlements that can create win-win solutions is integrative bargaining. Well, then let's move to the fourth question. What are the 5 steps in the negotiation process? Anyone out there? Okay, here are the 5 steps: preparation and planning, definition of ground rules, clarification and justification, bargaining and problem solving, closure and implementation. Everyone got it? Okay, cool. Here's the fifth one. How do individual differences influence negotiations? It seems like a tough one. I'll give the answer straight away. Personality traits in negotiation, models or emotions in negotiation, culture in negotiation, and gender in negotiations. This is the last one for our presentation. What are the roles and functions of third party negotiations? Okay, nobody. That's okay. It's mediator, arbitrator, and conciliator. That's end of our questionnaire. Let's move to Shoan. He's gonna conduct the conclusion part.
Now that we have a good idea of conflict and negotiation, let's move on to the case study and discuss how it reflects in the case study. The case study describes the conflict between Elaine and Jerry at their workplace. Jerry's actions in the office took a negative impact on Elaine and her workflow. This triggered the conflict. Now let's discuss the 5 conflict process in this case study. The communication between Elaine and Jerry were good at the starting, but then it was affected by this conflict. The 2 types of conflict we found in this case study are task conflict and process conflict. The stage 1 of the conflict process started when Jerry took interest in completing the easy and interesting parts in their workplace, leaving Elaine with all the hard and mundane tasks. This comes under the task conflict process. Process conflict is the other type of conflict that we can see in this case study. This can be divided into 5 basic steps. The first one is potential opposition or incompatibility. It is when they had good communications at the start, but then when Jerry took more effort in doing the interesting tasks, leaving Elaine to complete the hard tasks. This triggered the conflict, but it doesn't have a direct impact in the cause of this conflict. There are some other conditions that had impact in this conflict, which we can find in the next steps. Next stage is when Elaine eventually became aware of Jerry's ignorance when she tried to tell him that such actions from him are making issues for Elaine in their office. At this stage, both Elaine and Jerry senses the conflict between them, but there wasn't any emotional involvement between them. This stage is called cognition and personalization. The next stage in process conflict can be named as intentions, which is when Elaine got frustrated and angry about Jerry's irresponsible behaviors. The fourth stage is called behaviors. It's when Elaine had patience, she advised Jerry at the very beginning, and then she took necessary actions by letting the manager George know about the situations. Elaine used the technique called resolution technique, in which she created a shared goal where both had to work in order to get the job done. The final stage is called outcomes, and in this case study, we can not see that the conflict has been resolved and therefore no increased or decreased group performance. The next important subject that we have to discuss is about negotiations. There are 5 stages in the negotiation process. The first stage is preparation and planning. Elaine tried to resolve the conflict by herself, but it didn't work well. So she told her manager George about the history leading to this negotiation, the people involved, and her opinions regarding the issues. In the second stage, we can see both Elaine and Jerry exchange the initial proposals and demands, etc. The third stage is justification and clarification. This is when both Jerry and Elaine had to clarify, explain, and justify their actions. Bargaining and problem solving is the fourth step. It is here where concession is necessary to be made by both Jerry and Elaine. The final step of the negotiation process is closure and implementing. This is by validating the agreements that has been issued and implementing necessary procedures for monitoring and negotiation process. As explained earlier in the presentation, these are the important conflict process and negotiations that we can see in this case study.
Okay, thank you very much, guys, for your time. We hope you got a clear idea about what conflict and negotiation is. We are going to upload our presentation to YouTube. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave us a comment below. Thank you very much.